welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. Today I'm in Singapore and at the historic, not quite yet UNESCO certified Botanic Gardens. And if you followed my other video features in Singapore, you know that I'm focusing a lot on the integration of nature and culture because obviously Singapore at the equator is such a diverse place in terms of flora, fauna, climate, and so forth. And right now I'm on the evolution path, or in the evolution garden, and this is a very unique garden because it takes you through the ages, the geologic, the flora ages of the earth, and does so in a thematic way. So what I'd like to do today is to focus on this idea of creating a sense of theming, a sense of story in rather subtle ways. So let me take you through a bit of some of the video I shot today and also some of the images and show you this amazing effort at subtly theming nature. And I think one of the things that we could recognize about the Botanic Gardens here is that, yes, indeed, there is human signs of construction and creating pathways and signage, and as you'll see in a bit, a visitor center and restaurants and fountains and all the sorts of things we would see in a more culturally associated theme space like a theme park, some of those that I've been featuring in these video features. But I think the significance here, as you can maybe pick up some of the ambient sounds, is the fact that theming in a sense is done, immersion is done on behalf of us by nature, as kind of crazy and existential as that sounds. And I think it's something we can't forget when we're in a space like this that has such natural significance.
And in this feature, my focus is this idea of minimal theming, and basically addressing the idea that in a case of a site of natural and cultural heritage like Singapore's Botanic Gardens, you wouldn't want to overdo the theming. And as you can see here, as I'm walking up the pathway to the rainforest, which, as I mentioned earlier, is incredibly significant in terms of the UNESCO application of the gardens, I think we're seeing here that nature can do its own work, and you don't have to overdo the theming in any ways. I'll show you later some of the signage and other ways in which they do offer some minimal adaptation to this natural environment for the guest. And so here's a first example, one of my favorite gardens, which is a theme garden, the evolution theme garden. And as you'll see in a second here, walking along the path, you do have some obvious examples of human inhabitation or construction. In this case, these drinking fountains. These are not distracting, though. I think essentially they offer a very minimal amount of adaptation or change to this environment. Along the left there, you also saw some petrified trees, and those were brought in. Here you see some signage, and I think this is quite effective. This is actually, as you'll see the right part of the panel here in a second, it's actually part of an entire timeline that as the guest goes through the gardens, he or she then appreciates the various ages of the earth, the geologic periods, the flora and the fauna associated. Here's an example here on the ground of a marker that indicates the time. And so, indeed, this is appropriate and very minimal. It's not in the face of the guest by any means. Now, there are some examples here of some dinosaur prints that I suppose you could look at it and say it is somewhat distracting, but I think overall it's kept to a minimum, so it's not overly indulgent in terms of what it offers to the guest. Again, I think a key indication here would be to say that you can use subtle markers like these, design markers, to adequately orient the guest in the space. And I wanted to also show you some of the maps that are available at the Botanic Gardens, as you can see here. And excuse the comparison here, but in some ways, when you look at this map, you might think of a theme park, just in terms of the scale and the varied spaces that are present. Unlike many other Botanic Gardens that I've visited, Singapore certainly has different zones. As you can see here, there's a separate pamphlet and map just describing one of the many theme gardens, which is the Healing Garden. And I think what you see here is that they've used maps in an effective way to orient the guest in the space. And we can take a look as well at some of the signage that you see. In this case, we have a location map that is available for the guest. Here is a descriptive plaque, I believe near the gift shop, that offers the guest an overview of the significance of the gardens. And throughout the spaces, including here, the entrance of the rainforest, you do have plaques along with the signs and the maps that are used in an effective and subtle way. And here we have markers that orient the guest in the space, and indeed some of the pathways are a bit difficult to find your way on, so I think this is a good approach here. And you can see an example here of some of the signage, this being a bit more themed than other examples. This example here telling the guest about something significant to look out for, which I think is subtle and appropriate for the space. And here you see a different sign for the evolution garden path, which seems to be a fairly simple marker. And as I showed you earlier, of course, in the evolution garden, you do have these time markers that give the guest an important sense of the geologic time that he or she is witnessing. And here is a different sign offered at the entrance of the healing garden. And here I want to show you some of the sites of the essentially what is the visitor center at the Botanic Gardens. You could see the very nice fountains here. And I think although there is a visitor center and you have a gift shop, and as you'll see in a second, there are restaurants and so forth, these are not in any way distractions. And I will show you some other spaces in Singapore where indeed I think some of the consumerist type things that are offered become somewhat of a distraction. I think in these cases it's an opportunity to support the space and certainly does not take away from the majesty and the natural heritage of the plants. And this was quite amazing to me. Even in the restroom, open wall here, and you have an opportunity to just take in all the nature that is around you. As we look here at another example of an artificiality, these fossilized remains that are recreated in the pavement, I guess we can use this opportunity to reflect on the fact that even though these are examples of something that could be seen as distractions to the guest, they're not part of the natural landscape. They're part of the evolution garden, and they're part of an overall story that is told to the guest. And I never got the sense, walking through Singapore's amazing botanic gardens, that anything was done in a non-subtle way. In fact, if you had immersive technologies and video walls and the like of the sorts at Gardens at the Bay, these technologies simply wouldn't work. What they have here, I believe, is quite appropriate. So let's close on this next section here and just listen to the sound of bamboo in the wind.
I hope you enjoyed this video feature today at Singapore's amazing Botanic Gardens, and that you will come back for additional video features of the Immersive Worlds Handbook.